So if we were going to talk about examples of different types of speed we see on the squash court, maybe some different players that use speed in different ways, can we throw that over to you and
sure.
talk about what
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my first and one of my go-tos actually for thinking about movement and thinking about speed is Jancha Khan. You're going to struggle to dig footage out of him maybe on your Squash Skills archives, but there's a little bit out there. He, for me, is one of the sort of ultimate templates for efficiency of movement, but also incredible use of speed at the right times and the right ways. So he's very much a sort of a go-to for my reference, I suppose, for that efficiency of speed. And then in the sort of modern game, you have, I think there are a few players who kind of capture that and relate to that in quite a similar way. Quite often hear the commentators talking about Diego's movement and how that is similar to Jancha in some ways. Gawad and Ali Farag both have I'd say a similar way of using their speed in a very efficient and well-timed way. But I think also important to mention that the way that players use their speed is in relation to the kind of bodies they have. So earlier I talked about Tarek and how his body is, it's kind of almost a bit of a smaller, lighter, fast twitch kind of body. And then actually, Greg Gaultier, another one in that sort of same category that has that, real raw speed. It's almost more aggressive in a way, the movement, and can be, which is also obviously very, very effective and destructive. So although my thing, I suppose, is much more about efficiency, at the same time, the difference between a Tarek and a Jancha is a lot to do with body type, but also character. So when we're looking at these different types of players, at the top of the game now or in past history, how they use their speed is partly in relation to, as I said, what kind of bodies they have and how their bodies naturally move, and that'll be something which is just given one way or another, but also their character type. And I've talked before on the Squash Skills playlists about how an individual's character has such a bearing on their whole mindset, their game style, and even how they move. So when we're seeing these different characters, and you can pick it up sometimes in the sort of heat of the battle in big events where, as I said, someone like Diego perhaps has a pretty chilled character, and that lends itself to this more efficient, let's say less explosive or raw explosive movement. Whereas there's other players I mentioned, the Tareks and the Miguels, and maybe Greg as well. There's more of a kind of heightened, almost nervous system and a sort of sharper sense in their bodies. Both are super effective, of course. They've all dominated the sport or are dominating the sport. So I think that's just always a really important thing to consider for all players, is that I'm never a coach that says, well, this person is super fast, for example. Say Tarek is super fast, right? The people that I work with need to be super fast in that way. It's much more about understanding where the strengths are and how to maximize those, but also how to make the most efficient version of that body and that character type and know which buttons to press accordingly.
And I mean, it's no coincidence that some of the fastest players on tour that we talk about, the Tareks, the Miguels, the Peter Creeds, they are a little bit shorter. Their reach is probably a little bit shorter. They have to be quicker, so they seem to cover the ground quicker when you compare them to somebody like Ali, right?
Yeah. True. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's just a simple reality of how many steps you can or can't take.
But they're lighter as well, so they cover the ground quicker.
Exactly. But still, the same thing applies. Every player needs to be able to cover this space. At times with explosive speed, and it's figuring out, for that individual, which parts of the puzzle, which pieces of the puzzle need to be developed in according to improve that. So, for example, someone like Peter Creed, it could be actually almost slowing him down slightly to make him faster, whereas somebody else could be speeding them up. So it's a really interesting subject. Yeah.